Hi, this is Rev Ed with today's Back Porch Devotional from Genesis chapter 47, verses 27 through 31. Thus Israel settled in the land of Egypt, in the land of Goshen, and they gained possessions in it and were fruitful and multiplied greatly. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So the days of Jacob, the years of his life, were 147 years. And when the time drew near that Israel must die, he called his son Joseph and said to him, "If now I have found favor in your sight, put your hand under my thigh, and promise to deal kindly and truly with me. Do not bury me in Egypt, but let me lie with my fathers. Carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burying place." And he answered, "I will do as you have said." And he said, "Swear to me." And he swore to him. Then Israel bowed himself upon the head of his bed. Israel, that is Jacob, lives in Egypt for another 17 years after he came with all of Joseph's brothers down to Egypt, where they were spared from disaster and the famine. Joseph had made a place for them. They were given land, and they were given occupations, and they were given protection under the hand of Pharaoh because of Joseph's relationship to Pharaoh. They multiplied, and they were fruitful. They gained possessions, and they were doing well. But as Jacob approaches the end of his days, he does not want to end up buried in Egypt. He knows that Egypt is not his true home. He wants to go back to the place that was promised to Abraham and to Isaac, his own father. He wants to be buried there as a sign that he knows that that land is part of the covenant that God made with him, made with his father, made with his grandfather. So he wants to be buried in the place of his own people. He wants to go home. And I think it's beautiful here that he calls Joseph to be the one to carry out that promise. You know, Joseph was the next to youngest brother. Reuben was the oldest, but he had disqualified himself long ago from leadership in the family. And Judah had kind of assumed that role. But it is here with Joseph that Jacob makes him make a pledge. Joseph, obviously, at least in Egypt, is the most important one. And so he knew, Jacob knew, that Joseph would be able to carry this instruction out. And it's a statement of just tenderness and beauty that he says, "Make this pledge to me." Now, there is that weird bit about putting the hand under the thigh, and most scholars believe that's because, well, that's sort of close to the place of procreation, we'll just put it that way, which signifies the solemnity and seriousness of the oath. And Joseph makes him that promise. And so Jacob prepares himself to die. He's ready to go home. And I think what we see in Jacob's heart, this desire to return home, the kind of desire that all of us feel at one point or another. You know, if you were raised in a particular place, you have a deep and abiding love for that place. You think of it as your home, and you always have a tinge of homesickness if you're not there. Well, I think as Christians, what we have to bear in mind is that we're not home yet either. We know that this world, as it is currently constituted, is not our home. There's great beauty, there's great wonder, there's great diversity, there's great joy in this world, but it is far from perfect. There is sadness, and there is death, and there is disease, and there is anger, and there is strife. And we know that this is not ultimately the home that God has promised for us. The writer of Hebrews describes in the 11th chapter all of those who had been faithful and that had been looking forward to the fulfillment of God's promises. And beginning at the 13th verse says this: "These all died in faith, not having received the things promised, but having seen them and greeted them from afar, and having acknowledged that they were strangers and exiles on the earth. For people that speak like this make it clear that they are seeking a homeland. If they had been thinking of that land from which they had gone out, they would have had the opportunity to return. But as it is, they desire a better country, that is, a heavenly one. Therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared for them a city. And what we have to always keep in mind is that this world is not our home. One day it will be, when it is restored and renewed and transformed, even as we are, when the Lord returns at the second coming. All things then will be made new. The new heaven and the new earth will be united as they were at the beginning of creation, and all things will be as they should be. But in this world, we know that we're going to have trouble and tribulation and sorrow and sadness, and we don't need to get too attached to the things of this world. You know, C.S. Lewis once remarked that all of us can imagine a different world, a better world. And he said, what purpose would there be in imagining such a world if we were not, in fact, intended for that world? So the longing that we feel is for the world that God has promised to us. There's a word in the Welsh language. It's hiraeth. It's Hiraeth. And it simply means homesickness, but it can also mean homesickness for a place you've never been. And I think that perfectly describes the longing that we have for our heavenly home. And so we need to take care of the world that we are in, because we are stewards of it. God has put us here to help take care of this place and to bear witness to him no matter what's going on around us. But we can also lean into that longing for that better world as we recognize that this is not the perfect world that we were intended for, but that one day we will know that place. So Paul writes in the second letter to the church at Corinth in the 4th chapter. He says, so we do not lose heart. Though our outer nature is wasting away, our inner nature is being renewed day by day. For this slight, momentary affliction is preparing us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison, as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal. Enjoy this world, but don't get too attached to it, because God has prepared for us a new home, a better home, the home for which we were designed. And let the longing for that home drive all your thoughts and actions in this world as we seek to bear witness to the God who has promised to prepare a place for us and to be with us forever. God's blessings be upon you this day.